shit, dog. Get out of here.
Double down, lug nut. Welcome to the food tribe, bitches. Yup. Bah! Tomorrow, I'm going to San Francisco to see my sister get married. Yay! Welcome to the Food Tribe podcast, where men can be men and butch can be butch. I've been really excited about this episode. I mean, excited about all the episodes, but I think this one's going to hopefully help you sort of just get a different perspective. I think that's the way I want to phrase it. Hopefully provide a different perspective, and then you can determine whether or not you want to do it or it's the right thing for you, right? Options. So do me a favor. I just literally filled up my Yeti with slightly sweet tea. Never heard of that before. And I'll be honest with you, it's slightly sweet and quite delicious. I've had my second glass. Do me a favor. Do yourself a favor. I'll see you in there. Welcome to this week's episode of the Food Tribe podcast. We're going to be talking about stage number 2 of In Between Men. And why dilly-dally? Let's jump right into it. I'm going to get into the definition of stage number 2 of In Between Men. And it goes something like this. Over time, in between men gradually accept that one or more aspects of the traditional male value system does lack emotional and or spiritual substance. Although these men have become willing and compelled to take actionable steps to learn how to grow emotionally and or spiritually. Regardless of their outcomes, often these men feel graced with a new inner perspective on how to engage and interact with their family, friends, people, and the outside world. These men have reached the starting point of how to continue to learn and practice how to be in between men. All right? So it's really 4 sentences, but I'm only going to really go over the first 3 and share with you some of the reasons I came up with, how I came up with this definition. So for starters, since I know you were one of the 3 people who listened to my podcast last week, because I got an announcement that I had 3 downloads in one day. I'm so psyched. I mean, look, it's got to start somewhere. You know, all big things start small. But last week's stage number 1 episode of the In Between Men, you might recall, since I know you've listened to that podcast, that the first sentence is exactly the same as the sentence in that stage. There's fundamentally no difference. Both men in either one of these stages have either accepted and choose to reject or deny that they can grow spiritually or emotionally. And this group is now becomes willing and compelled. So in the previous episode, we talked about aspects or certain values that are aligned to the traditional male value system. And the one that resonated, I thought, the most with me was the concept of emotional stoicism or emotional control. And it spoke about how unrealistic it is for men to be indifferent towards really any emotions, especially if they're severe or they're significant and compelling and traumatic and terrifying. I mean, not to go to extremes, but I mean, I would imagine PTSD from a soldier coming back from a war in Afghanistan is rather traumatizing. How do you work through that? You know, you don't. You got to get some help. So they're compelled to kind of do that or not. I mean, worst case scenario, you know, what they do is they don't accept that they need to be willing or compelled, and they just put a bullet in their mouth. I mean, that's how far off the spectrum we are, but I digress. So I think the real game changer in this stage is the second sentence. You know, and there are 2 words in particular that I want to speak to in this sentence. And so, although these men have become willing and compelled to take actionable steps to learn how to grow emotionally and or spiritually. So let's start with the word willing. And so here is the definition of willing: being ready, inclined, or favorably disposed to do something. It can also mean being prompted to act or respond, or accepting by choice without reluctance. And while I was doing this, I originally wrote in this description, became honestly willing. And I threw the word honesty in there. And then I realized that you don't have to be honestly willing to be at this stage. And if I'm being candid, and if we really think about how men respond in these situations, which are, they have usually exhausted every single option that they have for themselves prior to getting to a place where they either have to ask for help or in so much pain, that they can't go on any longer. And sadly, suicide rates are at their highest. And I think that this could be, part of the reasons why. The idea of being willing to, look through emotional trauma and dynamics is scary, because that's what we've learned from the beginning. So it just makes sense. It feels comfortable to just be like, I'm just going to stuff it. And I get that. So the caveat, and what I like about this description, it it can also mean being prompted to act or respond. And so there's no concept of honesty associated with this. And if you use my example of how men get to a place where they finally have exhausted every, option available to them, they've kind of come to a place where they have to make a decision. And in the previous stage, that decision was to reject and deny, right? This doesn't apply to me. Now we're at a spot where we're willing, and I want to quantify what degree of willingness you need to have. And it's less than 0.5%. It's less than 0.5%. If you're just willing to believe that there could be light at the end of this tunnel, that's good enough. And if you want to still be angry that you have to go through the process or even consider it, then so be it. I'll take 0.5%. And if you can chalk that up as, okay, then I'm willing, then we're good to go. Now, the other dynamic here too, or the other component here that I think is also really important to mention, is the word compelled. So let's just take a moment and define the word. Compelled means force or oblige someone to do something or bring about something by the use of force or pressure. Okay? So, did I tell you that I'm imbibing on a delicious Yeti full of slightly sweet tea? It's not sweet tea. It's slightly sweet tea. And it's the perfect amount of sweet. It's not too sweet. I'm sorry. I digress. But if we go back to the example I gave about being willing and being a fraction of a percent willing, okay? If that individual, or for me, for example, if I've exhausted all of my personal means to overcome emotional challenges, that usually means that I'm at a turning point, I'm at a crossroads. And depending on the individual and depending on the circumstances, people can be forced into being compelled by the legal system, by the police, by their job, by their family members. You can be compelled to want to take a look. And the difference between this definition and the others is that this person has become individually compelled to want to be 0.5% willing to see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? They believe it's there, they see that it's there, they can acknowledge it's there, but they have a really hard time believing it's for them too. And I'm telling you out of the gate right now, based on my humble opinion, Butchie's opinion too, by the way, that you are worthy. You are 100% worthy of that. So I had written down some notes on the word compelled, and you could substitute emotional bottom with compelled. I didn't want to be so specific, but that's how I wanted to help all of you understand how I came up with that. Now, you might be asking yourself, what are actionable steps? And I'll just tell you quite candidly, yet to be determined. I'm working on that next. Okay, so the third sentence is, regardless of their outcomes, often these men feel graced with a new inner perspective on how to engage and interact with their family, friends, people, and the outside world behind them. Now, that sounds awkward, but I'm okay with that. And so, what really happens in this stage, regardless of their outcome? So, if we have substituted the word willing and compelled with rejected and denied, we have someone who is willing to accept a different perspective based on the actionable items. When it comes to emotions and when it comes to growing, not all of them are enjoyable. Quite the contrary, if I'm being honest. Most of the time, or some of the time, or a large percentage of the time, we're having to recognize things that we've done that we either need to apologize for or, admit that we made a mistake. And, there's discomfort involved. And anytime there's discomfort involved with emotions and learning, personal learning, all of us, me included, we get sensitive. And I'm no exception to that. I don't like to experience new levels of pain I may not had before and admit that I don't know when they'll end, but I believe that they will. I mean, it's a barbed wire pill. And so the reality of working through these emotions is that some will be incredibly joyful, some of them will be really scary and hard, but I think at the end of the day, this is what I believe Richard Rohr defines as necessary suffering. Not in like a malicious self-harming way, but in sort of an enlightened type of way where you're now embracing and experiencing a process that will help you understand many things. And trying to be vague as much as I can because I don't want to be too specific. But you know, this is where men can grow and learn and understand their emotions just in a different way. And so I want to share with you an analogy that I think is really easy to wrap your mind around. And I'll keep it short and I'll keep it sweet. And it goes something like this. So imagine being born with a backpack. You're in your little, you know, deal there at the hospital, and you got a backpack right next to you, and that backpack follows you around wherever you go. You carry it sometimes unknowingly, everywhere you go, and anytime, whether it be in the growing stage, whether it be the first or second stage of men, wherever, we're always carrying this thing around. And throughout the course of our days and throughout the course of the years, and as we continue to grow into the men that we become, we come across emotional dynamics that we've not experienced before or haven't wanted to experience before. And we do one of two things with them. We either see it for what it is and work through it, or we do what most men do is we look at it, we say, fuck this shit, I'm not looking at this, I'm just going to put it in my backpack and I'll deal with it later, right? And so over the years, you can imagine, with enough encounters, that backpack can get really heavy with all different types of rocks in it, different sizes, different textures, you name it, right? Some may be shiny, some may be bricks, who knows? But you fill in the blanks. And what happens in this stage two of in between men is that you finally take off the backpack. There it is on the ground with all of the rocks out of it. And, you look at each rock in detail, with the help of a professional or someone who can, help you navigate what you're going through. And then you do one of two things. You either decide that you're going to deny and reject that you have to look at or even want to look at these rocks, and you're going to put them back in your backpack and you're going to strap them back on, and you're going to carry them around until you can't carry them around anymore. Or you're going to become willing and compelled to take a look at them. And so let's just assume that you do. All right, because you're at that spot where you're willing and compelled to do that. And you do. And so you work through the process. And when you're done with that rock, you can throw it out. You don't have to put it back in your backpack anymore. And so when you're all finished at looking at all the rocks, you put your backpack back on, and you're levitating above the ground for like 3 inches. You're walking on air. You're Michael Jordan, from the free throw line, jumping. I mean, that's where you are. The freedom that you experience from letting go and processing all of your rocks is this new perspective. It's this new perspective that what you went through, a significant portion of what you went through is repeatable. And it's not like, you're aggressively trying to pursue more growth, but now when other opportunities for growth present themselves that you may have thrown them back in your backpack, you're more inclined to look at them for what they are and what they mean, and where you draw a line on what's acceptable, on what's not acceptable. And like I said before in previous podcasts, you become fundamentally changed. And you've worked through doing the right thing. Okay. And that's the stage. And then the last part of the stage is these men have reached the starting point of how to continue to learn and practice how to be in between men. So, in closing, the ultimate, I believe that the results after just doing this once will be significant enough that you are compelled to continue to keep doing it. That's not always the case. And the likelihood that it may happen that someone tries it and it gets worse could be there as well. I'm not saying that at all. This is no end all be all confirmed, 110% guaranteed back your money type deal. It's the process. And this is the starting point of becoming in between men. And really what that means is now you have a better understanding of what aspects of the male value system do apply to you, and can have a say on how you respond to how other people criticize you about whether or not you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. You can make the decision on your own. And you have developed and nurtured a process to begin doing it on an ongoing basis, assuming that you stay willing and assuming that you're still compelled. And the reality is that if you're not compelled anymore, you're going to keep doing what you've always done before. And that can happen. I'm not saying that it can't. But that's the new inner perspective. And different people have had different experiences with that outcome. And I'm simply asking you to just be open to it and not try to compare it with anybody else's. And I'm not trying to embellish on, what it could or couldn't be. I just am asking you, because you're trying something new, to be open to what the results could be, and then determine whether or not you like them. Because you can always go back to what you were doing before. That's certainly a viable option. And this is a no judgment zone. So I was going to end this podcast by talking about some other values or aspects that are defined in the traditional male value system. But after looking at it, I don't really think it's appropriate. I think we've kind of covered enough, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. So with that being said, let's put a bow on this episode and call it a day. If you have any additional questions or you want to propose an opinion or share your comments, please do. Love to hear any and all feedback. And do me a favor, and gosh, please do Butch a favor, and just get the fuck out of here. Why? Because you deserve some downtime. You really do. We all do. Let's have a little downtime and enjoy the day. Smell the roses a little bit. All right, guys. I'll see you in there. Well, there we go. We're at the end of the race. We're around turn 4. We're coming into the finish line. I hope you walked away with a different perspective, one that you might consider if you're, willing and compelled enough to consider something different, And I hope that at the least you have a different perspective than you may have had before you started listening, and I'll take that as progress. That is men. We are very patient when it comes to this stuff, and ironically, we can endure a lot of pain before we're ready to raise our hand and ask for help. And there's no right or wrong here. But I appreciate you guys more than you know for tuning in. I'll see you next week. I'll see you in there. Blueberry, Chesterfield, South Korea.